welcome. In this episode, as you can see from the title, we're going to talk a little bit about political theater. And the reason why is I'm sick and tired of it. I am. And I can't imagine I can get a lot of people to disagree with that. I can't, because it's just getting old, right? To where everything becomes about what team you're on, whether it's, Republican, Democrat, left, right. What's the other team saying? I got to post something. I got to say something. I got to argue something. I got to do something that's the opposite of the other team. Doesn't really matter if it makes sense, if it's coherent, if it's a thought out subject or a thought out comment, if there's any logic behind it, if there's any truth behind it. And it's just ridiculous. It has no place in modern society. It doesn't do anything but pull us all apart and make the chasm between perception and reality and truth and what you see on display by, social media and mainstream media and all of that become wider. It doesn't. And if I'm wrong, I dare you. I dare you to tell me I'm wrong. Go to Twitter, go to Facebook, send me an email. Tell me why political theater is anything but destructive and worthless to the social fabric of Western society. And so that's what we're going to talk about. I've got several topics that we'll cover to kind of lay out examples of, just in the past, few months of political theater and how every major topic is politicized, no matter what the damage to the truth is. And I'll go through, what are some more important things that we should be worried about than even, what we're talking about. So today is Saturday the 14th as I'm recording this. Most of this should be published today or tomorrow at the latest. As we all know, the topic of the day is the pandemic, the COVID-19 outbreak. And if there isn't a better example of an important issue being completely politicized, I don't know what is. And of course, that'll be something I talk about today. As it stands today, of course, it's a situation that's changing minute by minute. And right now it's about 2:04 p.m. Excuse me. And President Trump and the coronavirus task force have already had their news conference today on Saturday. And it's kind of disgusting to watch sometimes. Look, I've said this before on previous episodes. Full disclosure, I voted for Trump originally, right? Full disclosure, I used to be on Team Republican, Team Conservative, and some of that played into why I voted for Trump. Some of this whole group identity nonsense that I talk about, I was a part of, and I take responsibility for that. But again, part of this journey of this podcast and my journey is to help bring all of you along the same journey I've had, which is to, extract myself from that group think, that group identity nonsense. And I believe it's nonsense. Look, it's not to say you can't belong to a group. Many of us belong to many different groups. That's not the idea. The idea is belong to 100 groups if you want, by all means, but don't just simply identify with any of those groups and not think for yourself and not think out subjects and apply truth and logic, because you erode everyone's self-identity if you do that. And then you're able to look at any person, ignore anything about them individually, and make judgments solely on whatever group they most prominently identify with. And again, that chasm between who they are as a person and what they have to say, what their beliefs are, what their ideas are, what, who they are is made wider. And you'll never get to know what they believe and have an honest conversation about where you might differ, because you've predetermined that, right? And so this conference, this news conference today, it's the one where is in the White House briefing room. Trump's wearing the USA hat, and so just as a point of reference, just as one example of political theater. So a day after having a news conference from the Rose Garden, where he lays out the new FDA test, or the new test by Roche Diagnostics that was given emergency approval and basically fast-tracked through a process the FDA has had going back to 2013, as far as I can tell. They approved this test that now works with Roche Diagnostics' existing laboratory equipment that is already deployed throughout the world, and it's going to be able to work with the private sector. With I think one of the labs was LabCorp, and one of the other companies was Quest Diagnostics, and they're going to be able to deploy mobile testing stations, again utilizing another form of private industry. The Walmart CEO was there. You're going to be able to go to one of the Walmart parking lots. There's a couple of those around, right? And you'll be able to get a swab if you have all the symptoms. We'll get to the Google website thing shortly, but let's presume that happens. You go to a website, you put in your symptoms, you're told you should get tested, you're sent to your local Walmart parking lot, or maybe there's some kind of traffic management to send you to the one that's the least busy, something like that. That's what I would imagine, at least. That's the smart thing to do. Excuse me. And you get a nose swab. Information is collected, right? Because assuming they have to be able to track this test result back to you and whoever you are. And within 24 hours, that swab is sent to one of these labs, and the test is run on one of Roche's Cobas analyzers. And in 24 hours or so, probably 24 to 48 hours, you'll have your test results back. And then you can get the care you need, hopefully. And it'll eliminate, people that are not positive and don't need to flood our healthcare system and our healthcare workers with somebody that maybe just has the cold, right? Or God forbid has the flu, which can be very bad, but for a lot of people is not so bad. And so he has this press conference yesterday and then another press conference today. And some of the questions and some of the posts on Twitter and some of the news stories and the blog stories have been about Trump touching the microphone, Trump shaking hands, and should he be doing that? And Trump standing next to a person who supposedly tested positive for COVID-19 while he's down at Mar-a-Lago in Florida. Which I'm not saying any of that's not true. That's not the point. The point is, what the hell are you talking about? Are you really going to stand there and ask the president of the United States about why he was shaking hands yesterday? I mean, are you serious? And his response, like many of his responses, because a lot of times he does not subscribe to this brand of political theater, his response is basically to calm down and maybe we all should consider, not shaking hands. He goes on to say, well, maybe it's something we consider long-term, and maybe you shouldn't be shaking hands with people on a daily basis because it's a great way to spread infections and disease. And he says that, before getting into politics, he wasn't really a handshaker. And I don't know if that's true or not. I don't know why it wouldn't be. But he says that it's just something you get used to. Somebody extends their hand. So it's a natural reaction, right? It's polite. It's something that's ingrained in our sense of kind of social awareness. And, you're socialized, at least as a man, you're socialized to have a nice, firm handshake that's supposed to give you a first impression or give somebody else a first impression about you and who you are. And maybe we're just evolving and learning. And so, yeah, maybe the president should stop shaking people's hands. Sure. Great. Stop shaking hands. Ask the president about if he's shaking hands. Or you could also talk about the things that are actually important, which are the response to this pandemic and what's going on. There are reporters that ask perfectly reasonable questions like, how obviously people are flocking to stores. They're emptying shelves, toilet papers, inaccessible, hand sanitizers, not accessible, wipes are not accessible. I've heard of things like Walmart canceling grocery pickups, and you see the videos of the crazy long lines, like it's Black Friday, and you see the pictures of all the empty shelves, whether it's toilet paper or cleaners or even meats, that sort of thing. And so there's a question about, should people be doing that? Or should they, according to what Walmart said, Walmart CEO pledged yesterday to remain open and to try to stock the shelves as fast as they can. So the question today was about should people be buying at the rate they're buying, or should they slow down? Now, all's fair, right? He didn't really answer that question. Okay, fine. And then the second question was about how Apple announced that it was closing its stores for, I think, 2 weeks. And was that something he recommended that other retailers do? And he said he didn't really answer the question, but he said he thought it was fine what they did. And he said, well, maybe people should, because what's the term of the day? Social distancing, right? So should you be going to the Apple store right now during a pandemic outbreak and shopping for a new iPhone? Explain why, I guess. Why is that important? I guess that's for the folks that say, everybody's blowing this out of proportion. Let's compare this to swine flu. That was really bad, but nobody freaked out. Fine. Okay. Let's talk about that in a second. So these press conferences, and just go to Twitter. I mean, it's just insane, right? You get, and I'm going to go through some steps I think are important for everybody to how to remove yourself, disengage yourself from political theater. So I've got some steps I'll go through in a second. But again, back to the political theater surrounding the pandemic. So again, these press conferences that Trump has had with the coronavirus task force led by the vice president, and yesterday that task force plus CEOs of, what was it? Walmart, Target, Walgreens, CVS, Roche Diagnostics, Quest Diagnostics, I think, LabCorp. I think there was a couple others. So you have this type of major endeavor. I mean, I'm not saying it's never happened, but I can't remember a time when the executive branch, along with government agencies during a crisis or to solve a major problem, worked in such a way to engage private industry to help to bring a lot of different solutions to the table, and probably a lot faster. I can't think of a time. So I don't think it's an insignificant thing, but one thing we probably should worry about, right? Something like, now I don't follow Stephen King, but I imagine a lot of people do. Stephen King, the writer. So let's check it out. So let's see. So Stephen King, world-renowned writer, fiction writer, right? 5.7 million followers on Facebook. He's obviously an anti-Trump guy, or now I know that. So after this press conference with the leaders of industry and the coronavirus task force, he tweets out about how the task force is mostly men. And I think he even said mostly white men. So if you're listening on audio, this just makes me speechless. I mean, what do you say to that? All this information that's provided by the executive branch, all this information that's provided by the leaders of industry, and your comment is about the gender equality of the task force and the racial equality of the task force, which, by the way, is wrong. So somebody had to point out to him that, you know, the task force is actually made up of different races and different genders. There are a couple women on the task force. So, but then there's always a reason why that's insignificant, right? There's always an explanation why you said that there's the backtracking and saying, well, like this person's fairly new or something. There's always, it was a reaction that person was added later. Which maybe, again, that's another brand of political theater, gender equality, right? And you've had during this, right before this pandemic, or I should say at the early stages of it, you can go and find tweets by CNN focusing on the makeup of these task force, these committees, worrying about the gender equality of them. Which, I mean, guys and girls, let's focus on the important issues. Let's worry about gender equality when there's a time and place. But let's focus on the right thing. And this is where this topic becomes completely politicized. And that's equality of opportunity versus equality of outcome. And that's where the far left would push the equality of outcome. Case in point, right? This committee that you see on, and they tweet a picture of it this committee sitting around like a board table, and they show how it's mostly like white men, for instance. Okay. Should that committee, whatever it is, it's a government committee. I think it's one of the task force. Should it just be diverse for the sake of diversity? Or should we just ensure that the opportunity to be on the task force was equal? What's most important? You decide. Again, this is truth in dialogue. So ask your spouse that. Ask, whether you're a man or a woman, ask your spouse that question. What's more important when you talk about gender equality? And no matter what it is, whether it's the workforce or education or government, political office, what's more important? The opportunity, equality and opportunity. Everybody gets a fair chance. Everybody gets a shot, no matter. Really, this is equality across all differences. Gender, race, sexual orientation, nationality, doesn't matter what it is. What's most important? Opportunity and an open door for everybody, or decided outcome, equality of outcome. Meaning, on this committee, you pick people that are not white. You pick people that are not men only because of those traits. Is that more important than them being provided the opportunity? So let's go to another, maybe, I don't know, you decide here. What's the most egregious form of political theater that we've experienced in recent history? And obviously the COVID-19 pandemic is not done, so it may take the cake. But what about impeachment? I've advertised and I'm researching impeachment for a potential episode, and that's still in the works. I'm about 37 hours deep on the trial itself in the Senate. And let's relate this real quick to one thing I was thinking about. And this is going to get me in trouble, and I know it. I just know it. I'm getting a little more followers on Twitter. This is going to be shared. Somebody's going to call me something. It's going to happen. Because if you look at the House impeachment managers that are presenting the case for impeachment during the trial, and you compare that group of people with, say, let's just say the president's counsel, because they're the ones. I mean, I've really only, I'm still in the House manager's presentation of their case. So I think I'm almost to day 4. If you look at those groups of individuals, you would automatically say, if asked the question, that the House managers are the more diverse group of people. You would, because the president's counsel is, I believe, all white men. The House managers are Adam Schiff, of course. I think I have a list here. So Adam Schiff, Jerry Nadler, Zoe Lofgren, Hakeem Jeffries, Val Demings, Jason Crow, and Sylvia Garcia. So this is where I'm going to get in trouble. If you listen to, let me check out which one I'm talking about. Again, I'm taking a break on the impeachment because this COVID-19 thing is obviously blown up. So we know Adam Schiff, white man. We know Jerry Nadler, white man. So Adam Schiff, for instance, very well spoken. He's very good at standing up and presenting his case. He does a great job of not just reading the text in front of him of whatever, his binder says. He does a great job of looking around, putting emotion into it, emphasizing certain points versus others, and making it more of a conversation and more of a speech than he is reading a book. Does a good job of that. The others are at times very tough to watch. I mean, again, you're watching hours of these presentations. So who is it? So Hakeem Jeffries. Okay, Hakeem Jeffries. He's House of Representatives, New York's 8th District, since 2013. He's a black man. He's very good. He's very well spoken. He's, again, just right up there with Adam Schiff and the way he's able to lay out his case. He's able to crack some jokes here and there, which you tell me if that's the best way to do that, or the best place to do that. But he's able to... I think it's tough when you're trying to listen to somebody, especially, you got to remember this Senate trial, they are told they can't have their phones. They get, I think they get a notebook. They can't drink anything but water. They got to sit there and listen, which, why shouldn't they, right? It's a very important issue being discussed, impeachment. So Sylvia Garcia, one of the other ones. She's a woman. She's a white woman, serving the Texas 29th District. She's brand new, it looks like. Very tough to watch. I'm sorry. She's just tough to watch. I'm not saying that's because she's a woman. I'm not saying that's because she's not a man. I'm judging the individual based on the individual's performance, you might say. And full disclosure, I would not be good at this. I am not that good at standing in front of people and giving speeches and not reading what's in front of me and not rushing through it and those sort of things. I'm not in the U.S. Congress, though. And so Sylvia Garcia, watching her, it's tough to understand how it is that she got elected. How did she make speeches at campaign rallies and on videos? Maybe she was better at that. Or maybe you have equality of outcome on display. I don't know. I'm not making a case for that. All I'm saying is the facts. A little bit of my opinion in that she's very tough to listen to. Some words mispronounced, a lot of reading. Let me read her bio on Google, the way she was reading the text of the impeachment case. Sylvia Rodriguez Garcia is an American politician who has been serving as the U.S. representative for Texas's 29th congressional district since 2019. Her district covers much of eastern Houston. A member of the Democratic Party, she previously represented District 6 in the Texas Senate. It's kind of like that, which is, you can stomach that for a while, but multiple hours of this, and it becomes very tough to watch. What are some of the others? Let's see, Val Demings. Okay, so Val Demings, she's the one who's the retired law enforcement officer, serves Florida's 10th district. She previously was the chief of the Orlando Police Department. So she has a little more exuberance in reading this, kind of like closer to Adam Schiff. She's not as much reading the text as she is doing a little more of a presentation. Still tough, kind of tough to listen to. A lot of words mispronounced. I don't mean just a couple here and there. I mean a lot of words, and a lot of the same words repeatedly mispronounced. Again, I can't help but imagine that there was somebody more eloquent running against her. Man, woman, black, white, or whatever. It doesn't matter. I'm not making the case that there shouldn't be equal opportunity. That's not the point here. The point is, did some of these folks end up in Congress because of this party's affiliation with equality of outcome? Just the mere fact that we need to have diversity at the cost of anything else. And I wonder if that's not part of the political theater of impeachment. I don't know if you can make the case for anything but that when you see the diversity there. Which, let me just go into that just real quick. The equality of outcome, I think, is a very dangerous doctrine, and it erodes truth and integrity in all things it's applied to. I really believe that. If you talk about equality in opportunity and equality of outcome in hiring practices from a company, if you are choosing, I don't know how you can have it both ways. You just can't. So equality of outcome would dictate you need to have diversity for the sake of diversity. So in essence, at its core, you would pick somebody based solely on their gender or their race, for instance. Isn't that the entire, isn't that what we're trying to avoid entirely in hiring practices? Like when people would only hire white people or only allow white people into like restaurants, that sort of thing. Well, that's racism, right? That's clearly racism, and I wouldn't disagree. But is it not racist then to hire somebody of a non-white color because they're not white? Is that not racist against the white person? I don't know. I'm maybe too dumb to talk about this. I don't know. It doesn't seem right to me if you really stop and think about it. And that's the point. Stop, shut up, and think about it. Is it not just important to hire somebody based on their ability to do the job that you're hiring for? And that's it. And it doesn't really matter what gender, race, religion, sexual orientation. Doesn't matter. Shouldn't matter. You know, it's like that that stupid show. What was that show? Love is Blind. Have you seen this show? My wife's going to give me crap for this, but this show is reality smut at its finest. In my opinion, I'm not a big reality TV fan, as you might imagine. So this show, if you haven't seen it, was predicated on the idea love is blind, or it should be, and people are placed in like private rooms where there's like one person here and one person here. They can talk to each other, but they cannot see each other. They cannot touch each other. This whole process, they're supposed to build a relationship and talk with other people in this, they call it an experiment, and decide on marriage. They're supposed to pick a life partner based on this process. And just look it up. It didn't go so hot as far as actually producing meaningful relationships. But maybe that process could be employed in hiring. I don't know. Hiring is blind, or employment is blind. So I wonder what would happen. That'd be a hell of an experiment, right? So some major organization that brings in a lot of people per month go to a practice of only hiring people based on interviews that are blind, like that kind of setup. You're maybe in a room where you can hear the person on the other side of the wall, but you can never see them. And you must pick your the person you're hiring from the list of applicants that way. And everybody can apply. Everybody can be interviewed, right? That's equality of opportunity. Everybody can apply. Doesn't matter. And the person is picked based on the merits of their experience and resume and on the conversations and the interviews. And then once you've agreed to hire the person, then the door opens and then you get to meet them face to face. So there's my example of the differences in equality of opportunity versus outcome. And again, I think this whole topic is another example of major political theater. So we talked about, a little bit about the COVID-19 outbreak and how I think everybody would agree it's become major political theater. So a couple points on that. Again, Trump being criticized. I'm not saying don't criticize the president, but just think about some of the criticism. So Trump, you might say early on, enforces a travel ban to not allow people to come over from China. And that's obviously escalated to now. I think the latest news is they've actually included the UK and Ireland in the Europe travel ban. So Joe Biden, for instance, and that's a whole other topic by itself, but Biden has used words like xenophobia and racism and hysteria, referring to Trump. And then you have so I've seen a lot of comparisons to the swine flu, which is, the H1N1 outbreak in 2009 and through 2010. So, like, here's something I posted on Facebook, because I had seen this referenced a couple of times. And I'm kind of referring to the conservative outcry that I'm seeing, where folks are, especially in Indiana, a lot of folks are saying, calm down. It's not that big of a deal. We've dealt with worse. We've dealt with similar. We made it through all these things. Geez, guys, just calm down. And you see all the memes and all the pictures and all the people being made fun of. And so this is kind of a response to that, because I've seen the references to H1N1 in regards to that. So here's what I said. I said, all right, I get it. We should compare COVID-19 to H1N1 or swine flu. Here are the numbers that keep getting quoted. And this is directly from the CDC. Both of these, I've got two links basically. And as you know, I share all links that I'm talking about on the YouTube page. And again, that's the best place to listen. To listen to this. By the way, I've figured out the subscribe situation. So the little logo you see in the bottom down there, that's the subscribe button. But you can only click it on a computer, or I think maybe a tablet. So a lot of people, if you're watching on the phone, you see those logos in the bottom right-hand corner. Even the ones that say subscribe, you can't click that on your phone. So if you could subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell, get all notifications. I'd appreciate that. And while I'm talking about it, follow us on Facebook, on Twitter, get the audio podcast on Google Play and on Spotify. And now, through the magic of video manipulation, all of those links should be appearing on the screen. But anyway, so this CDC quote, here are the numbers that keep getting quoted. From April 12th, 2009 to April 10th, 2010, CDC estimated there were 60.8 million cases, which they've got a range that is 43.3 million to 89.3 million. 274,304 people hospitalized, which is a range from 195,000 or so to 400,000 or so, and 12,469 deaths, which is a range of 8,800 to 18,000 in the United States due to the H1N1 PDM09 virus. Okay. So, and I said, so the media is different, the reaction is different, closings are different. I understand. Obviously, it's hard to think of anything similar to this. I think for most of us, we've never experienced a situation like this. So let's talk math, okay? H1N1, 12,469 deaths out of an estimated 60.8 million cases, 60,800,000 cases. That is 0.02% or 0.00020. That's the math, right? Currently in the U.S., the CDC reports, and this is as of late March 13th, Friday the 13th. These are the numbers as of then. I know it's gone up today, the day this is being recorded. But this percentage has stayed about the same, or I think it's actually gone down a little bit. So currently in the US, the CDC reports 1,629 cases and 41 deaths. This equals 2.5% or 0.025. So I don't do it on here, but let me just point those out. H1N1, 0.02%. COVID-19, 2.5%. So if COVID-19 were to escalate to the numbers of infections of H1N1, 60.8 million or so, and the death rate stayed at 2.5%, we would lose 1.5 million Americans. 1.5 million. So say what you want about the level of hysteria and people trying to buy things off the shelves. Say what you want about businesses closing, schools closing, states of emergency being declared, funding being added. Say what you want. But the truth is that if we do not employ this term of social distancing, and we do not limit our contact with the general public and stop breathing around other humans, you can wash your hands and your surfaces all you want. But this thing is transmitting in the air through breathing next to people. And people can be infected and not showing symptoms and spreading it. And you may be in perfect health. You may be in my age range, 35 to 50, right? I'm 40 years old. You may be at very little risk for being very sick or dying. But that doesn't mean you can't become a carrier and spread it out to everybody else that you come in contact with. And it doesn't mean that won't eventually lead to the death of somebody that's at high risk or who's old. And if you don't believe that, you're not reading the fucking information that they're putting out. I'm sorry. It's ridiculous. It's nonsense. And it's lies. So do your own homework. Forget about the people, the mass hysteria, the emptying shelves. Look up the information. Why are these things happening? Why are they asking for social distancing? Why are they closing things? Look up why. Don't just fall under your team. Well, I'm Republican. Trump says it's fine. Must be fine. No reason to panic. You're all idiots. Or I'm a Democrat and Trump says it's fine, so it must not be fine. And CNN says it's not fine and we're being endangered by this administration, so I must panic. And you're all idiots. Dangerous. So dangerous. Think for yourselves. So back to Biden real quick. Another thing that is highly politicized, huge political theater. It's been going on for years now, especially with Trump and Pence as the VP. Gun rights, Second Amendment, NRA, all those things. Hot button issues, right? So if you haven't seen it, find the interaction that Joe Biden had when he was in Detroit at the Chrysler Fiat plant, where he was asked a question by one of the workers there. It's astounding. I mean, especially if you are on team left, team Democrat, and Trump must be defeated at all costs, and you can lay out all the ways that Trump's a terrible human being. Not going to argue with you, but then you're going to say, well, Joe Biden's my man. Watch that video. Sure Joe Biden's your man? Because he calls this guy full of shit. And he asks him to go outside, and he shushes his female aide who's trying to get him to not engage in this. And he goes on to talk about AR-14s and guns that don't exist and rounds of ammunition that don't exist. It's like this is that further discussion where we really need to be worried about Joe Biden. Like, as an individual, just watch him. Just watch all the recent videos. Decide for yourself, is this really a person that should be running for public office, or is this not a person that needs to seek neurological help and needs to see a doctor? Because the guy, he's forgetting his train of thought in the middle of speeches, in the middle of comments. He just seems like he's not all there. And that's terrible. You know, you don't want that to happen to anybody. And I hope he's not like in the early stages of dementia or Alzheimer's and that sort of thing. I hope not. But he needs help. It's getting bad. So, you know, that topic kind of blew up right in the middle of all this COVID-19 stuff. And so, again, political theater. You know, the issue is not the issue. The issue is control. A very smart person told me that once. The issue is never the issue. The issue is all about control. And if that doesn't describe political theater, I don't know what does. Because it's right now, it's mainstream media and the left versus Trump, and maybe you might say like Fox News. Or because, you know, then you have what you maybe say the non-conservative media outlets, Breitbart, that sort of thing. And it's all theater. Whatever one side says or does, the other side has to contradict it and call the other side a liar, and vice versa. And that's all that happens. And we end up nowhere. We end up with no truth, no logic, and nothing to actually use, no knowledge to work from, and it's pointless. And of course, elections. We're in this, you know, where all this is happening at once. You have the Democratic primaries coming down to the eventual nominee, or the DNC's candidate choice. And we've whittled down the Democratic Party, the Democratic nominees for president or candidates for president, down to 2 people now, right? And if you can't look at that whole process and see the political theater, wow, are you not paying attention? And if you're not paying attention to that, you know, just because you don't want to be involved, that's fine. I get it. But if you look at the DNC changing rules for the debates and changing some of the rules to be in the caucuses, and the mainstream media's support of that, and both mainstream media and the DNC attacking any of the candidates that are kind of in the middle ground, but still on the Democrat ticket. So like Andrew Yang, Tulsi Gabbard. Like I've said before on this episode, and I never thought I'd be able to say this, but these are 2 people that I could see myself voting for potentially if they made the case, a good enough case. And because I think that tells you a lot, because I think I'm being honest when I say I'm kind of now hovering out here in the middle by myself, because I'm trying to think for myself. And so that's why candidates like that seem reasonable to me. And because they seem reasonable, they're not controllable by the DNC and the Democratic superpower. And so they were ostracized. and they're both out. Well, I don't think Tulsi's officially announced. Maybe she has, but she's not getting invited to the debates. She's not getting any numbers in the polls. She was attacked by Hillary Clinton. I think she's still got a lawsuit against Google for them suspending her ads account during one of the campaigns. I think the debates. I think the one where she basically ruined Kamala Harris's campaign. So it's right there. It's right in front of you, and right in front of all of our eyes. And if you don't see what's happening, and now you're seeing it, I think, to a degree with Bernie Sanders. Look, I'll say this: I don't think I'd ever vote for Bernie Sanders, but he is he might be too far left of the left. Because he's obviously a self-professed socialist, and he believes at his core the socialist doctrine and the government redistribution of wealth and the social justice doctrine of and giving that power to government. And he's not. I think he's too far left, and I think he's somebody that the DNC cannot control. So he's starting to lose. And I feel for anybody that is a true, just honest Democrat, and they have those kind of traditional core beliefs. Who the hell are you going to vote for? Because Joe Biden is one step away from living in a senior assisted living facility. Like I said, I don't know about that guy. He needs to seek a professional's help. But political theater says he's the guy. We'll see. I think they're still supposed to have a debate, which should be interesting. All right. So how do you get out of this stuff? How do you get away from the political theater? How do you disengage and maybe start, figuring out what you believe in and not what your presumptive team says you should believe in? Step 1, social media break. Remove yourself from social media, whatever you got to do. Don't look at them. That's probably not enough. It's probably the temptation is too high. So maybe delete the apps from your phones, your tablets, whatever, and take at least a couple weeks off, if not a month. Get away from all social media, not just news outlets, all of them. And right after that or before that, stop following all news outlets, all of them. Get rid of them. CNN, Fox News, your local news, Breitbart, any of those blog type sites, remove them all. No news. If it's Facebook, remove everything except for your friends, your family, or actual people, and maybe remove everything else that you follow except for your interests and the pages you like. Remove it all. Stop following him on Twitter. And do this at least temporarily, if not permanently. And then after you've kind of purged yourself for this 2 weeks or month from all social media, slowly start to re-engage and go to the source. Guys, it's not that difficult. Think about the age we're living in technology. I watched the White House briefing today on the White House's YouTube page. I don't need to go to CNN.com or go to their Twitter page or go to the Washington Post or go to the New York Times or go to the Wall Street Journal or go to Fox News or go to my local media outlets. I don't need to read about this news briefing after the fact. I can watch it for all that it is. And then I can make my own determinations and have my own opinions about what was said, what was covered, how it was displayed. Do I hate Trump now? Do I love Trump now? Do I hate the government's response? Do I love the government's response? You can make your own determination. Think for yourself. Go to the source. You can go to, why do you need to hear about what the president tweets? Go to Twitter. Follow the president on Twitter, and you'll know what the president tweets. I can't count how many times you see news stories that tell you what the president just tweeted or what this person just tweeted. That's become news nowadays. Who can quote the tweet that's publicly available fast enough and tell you what they just tweeted on the same platform? Come on, guys. Go to the source yourself. If you don't like Twitter, fine. You can still look it up without having like a Twitter account. But for me, Twitter is the more succinct place to see information in a constant stream. Facebook used to allow you to kind of follow stuff in the order it was posted. I know you can still kind of do that and figure out and go to that version of your timeline, but I found that you still see gaps in times and you see gaps in things that are posted. So at least for now, Twitter is the most simple. They do have a timeline where you can put it in order of what they believe are the most important events for you, but you can also then revert it back to just chronological order. And for me, again, I don't think I think it's a terrible place to engage in meaningful dialogue and get in discussions with people because you have such a limited amount of characters to use, and it's more of a quick hitting and, screen grab sort of thing where you can, get somebody to bite on something you've said that's very polarizing, that sort of thing. It's not a good place for that, but it is still a place where you can just have access to information. Like I said, go to the source. If you want to follow the Prime Minister of Israel, do it. He's right there on Twitter. I mean, we're at an age where you have access to the most information you've ever had. So for those of you that say, well, don't believe anything you see on the internet. Well, there's plenty of that, but that's where you start reading news stories and you start reading blogs and opinions and all these people that are like, for instance, this is a big to-do about the COVID-19 response. So yesterday during President Trump's press conference at the Rose Garden with the leaders of industry, he mentioned that Google was building a website to where anybody could go on and put in your symptoms, and it would tell you if you should be checked out, if you shouldn't. And if you should, it'll direct you to a testing site, likely in like a Walmart parking lot. And then one of the individuals in the press conference that's on the task force, I don't know her name, but she held up like a workflow, just a quick, simple 5-step workflow of how this website's supposed to work. And she seemed very proud of it. And again, I think Trump mentioned the 1,700 engineers that are working on this website. Okay, so that's basically the gist of what he said. He didn't say it's available today. He didn't say it's available tomorrow. It's going to be available in 5 days. He didn't mention a timeline. So the political theater found a way to pose what Trump said as a lie. And because Google tweeted out that basically They are working on a site. They're not technically working on the site, but one of, Alphabet owns Google. That's the parent company. One of their sister companies is actually building the website. And right now it's going to be built for testing on the West Coast. And they hope to make it more broadly available, I think was the general terminology. I'll post the picture of it right around here. I'll put the picture of the Google tweet, which prompted a blog page to post a story that, here, I'll just tell you, it started with the words contrary. That was the first word. Said, this is the headline of The Verge, whatever that is. Update. Contrary to Trump's claim, Google is not building a nationwide coronavirus screening website. TheVerge.com. That's the headline. Political theater. It's a bold-faced lie. It is. So you click on their story, and they actually tell the truth for the most part in the description of the story, which is, and they show you Google's tweets that says, statement from Verily, that's the sister company. We are developing a tool to help triage individuals for COVID-19 testing. Verily is in the early stages of development and planning to roll testing out in the Bay Area with the hope of expanding more broadly over time. And then there's a thread, a second tweet. We appreciate the support of government officials and industry partners and thank the Google engineers who have volunteered to be part of this effort. But again, their headline and what you see on Twitter is contrary to Trump's claim, Google blah, 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 not blah, blah, blah. It's so dishonest. And I caught this because on Twitter, on the Truth and Dialogue Twitter page, I'm trying to maintain integrity to the mission, and I'm slowly building who I'm following, but I'm following every single member of Congress. Doesn't matter which party. And I think I've got everybody that is a candidate for president followed, including the one Republican challenger to Trump. But this person, I follow all the major news outlets too, just trying to get a picture of where everything is, but still trying to make my own mind up. And so this was retweeted by Jake Tapper, who is CNN anchor. And he actually quotes Google's tweet. He retweets the article, which has got that headline, but he quotes the tweet from Google stating how they're developing a tool. They're going to test it in the Bay Area with the hope of expanding more broadly over time. Again, Trump did not lay out a timeline. Nobody said this is available tomorrow to the nation. And so far that I've seen, Google has not just come out and contradicted to the Trump, which means you can't use the word contrary. Because I think I'm not an English major, but I believe those words are derivative of each other. Contradicted and contrary. That's not what he did. There is no contradiction from Google. In fact, they thanked the government officials. So, that Google's pretty far left. So, they're not going to come out and say, well, thanks, Trump, for mentioning us. But, so let's say they come out and actually contradict what the president said. Fine. You know what? It's a freaking website. Doesn't sound that complicated. Somebody else can build it. So why this is going to take any big amount of time, I'm not really sure. Because, as you know, Google's pretty big. So we'll see. But again, political theater. So that's what I'm saying. Go to the source. You can think for yourself. You can watch these briefings and these press conferences all by yourself. You don't need somebody else telling you what was said. Just listen to what was said. Come on, it's not that hard. And after you've gone to the source, think for yourself. Forget for a second that maybe historically you've leaned left, or maybe historically you've leaned right, conservative, or forget historically you've thought this way on this situation or that situation. Think for yourself. Listen to people that are engaging you in meaningful, truthful dialogue. Listen to them as though they have something to tell you that you don't know. And think for yourself. Finally, after all of this, re-engage with news and politics. If you want, re-engage with all those news sources. Again, that's what I've done on the Truth and Dialogue page. Go to the list of followers. You'll see I'm still building it, but it's people from, I just get those recommendations on who to follow. I see representative or congressman or senator. I don't even look at what party or affiliation they are. I click follow. I'll follow all of them until there's no more to follow. But if you re-engage with news and politics, it's kind of like Fight Club. Follow rule number 1 and follow rule number 2 as long as it doesn't break rule number 1. So in this whole process, social media break, stop following news outlets, go to the source, think for yourself. Rule number 4, re-engage with news and politics as long as you don't break rule number 4. So rule number 5, re-engage with news and politics. Don't break rule number 4. Think for yourself. And so the last thing that I'll mention is, besides politics and whatever is being played out on our, movie screen of political theater of the day, which right now obviously is COVID-19. What are some things that we should focus on as a society that apply to the long-term health of Western civilization and society? How about mental health? I've heard a little bit about this and I've researched a little bit about it. And I'll put a link up for this. This is a USA Today story that kind of describes when this not dramatic shift, over time you might consider a dramatic shift, but it really kind of originated with a bill that John Kennedy signed into law. John F. Kennedy signed into law. It's the last law he signed the last bill he signed before he was assassinated in 1963. It's here, I'll tell you the name of the bill. Was the Community Mental Health Act. And the idea behind this was, it was legislation to build 1,500 mental health centers that would basically equate to the population of those that are living in state mental hospitals at the time, which was about 500,000 people. I'm sorry, it would cut that number in half. And a quote from him, he said the idea was to successfully and quickly treat patients in their own communities and then return them to a useful place in society. And this article from USA Today, this is from 2013, is all about the title of the article is Kennedy's Vision for Mental Health Never Realized. And it goes through how, he signed the bill, and it was never fully implemented. And so it says, here's one of the quotes. It says, the legislation did help to usher in positive life-altering changes for people with serious illnesses such as schizophrenia, many of whom now live normal, productive lives with jobs and families. In 1963, the average stay in a state institution for people with schizophrenia was 11 years, but only half of the proposed centers were ever built, and those were never fully funded. So I won't go into a lot about that, but start thinking about this question. And this is kind of like the Bernie Sanders socialism idea of paying lots more in taxes, giving the government more money to distribute to those in need. So here's a good point. When has the government ever done anything very well? They botched this one. They didn't fully, they did not fulfill the purpose of this legislation. And so it said it was to provide $329 million to build mental health centers that were supposed to provide services to people who had formerly been in institutions, as well as to reach into communities to try to prevent the occurrence of new mental health disorders. Had the act been fully implemented, there would have been a single place in every community for people to go for mental health services. But one problem with the legislation was that it didn't provide money to operate the centers long term. Which, just think about the nature of our government, right? We have the separation of powers, and you need support in all three to pass any law, which, for instance, applies here, right? To keep funding going past the Kennedy presidential term. Let's say he had never been assassinated. Well, he still would have had to leave office at some point. And maybe at some point, Republican takes office. Maybe some point, Congress shifts to Republican. And they disagree with this. They cut funding. They cut the program. And they try to privatize it. And then there would be another natural shift. And now maybe it's another, Democrat-controlled Congress and president. And now they want to put it back on the table. And they want to increase funding and take the money out of taxpayer dollars. And you'd have that constant shift. So in this case, mental health, I think, is something we need to focus on as a society. For instance, mass shootings. This is where I originally heard this whole topic and how this law really affected mental health treatment in the United States. You could make the argument that this situation is actually one of the root causes of mass shootings. Because you can take away, all the guns you want from the people who are very seriously mentally ill. But the seriously mentally ill, if they want to hurt people, will find a way to hurt people. And you're just placing a Band-Aid, another Band-Aid, there's a Band-Aid, and you're not identifying the root cause of the problem. And so go find that the gentleman who asked Joe Biden the question that I referenced earlier at the Chrysler Fiat plant, he actually ended up on a lot of talk shows. He was on Dave Rubin's show. He was on, I think, Fox News. And that's one of his points. He addressed, he was addressing the Second Amendment with Joe Biden. And that's one of his points he made. So check that out. And maybe we should really focus on, community and ways of repairing and addressing and helping people with, not with government, not with private companies, but through community involvement. For instance, right? COVID-19, Facebook launched a fundraiser and Mark Zuckerberg shared it. It's asking for $10 million in donations. At this point, over $1 million have been raised. There you go. Didn't require a government program or anybody to pass a bill. People are just helping other people. a number of NBA players and Mark Cuban because the NBA is shut down. Because of the impact of that to the hourly workers at the teams and the stadiums, a number of them have pledged, like $100,000 donations to help those people out. Again, people helping people didn't require a government program. They're currently, the government is passing a bill to provide relief. Excuse me. It was passed in the House last night. I think it's supposed to go to the Senate on Monday. And everything Trump has said, he supports it. So that's great, and they've worked quickly to do that. But that shouldn't stop us from just helping those in need when we have the ability. And, there have been a number of internet providers that have come out and offered low price deals on new internet subscriptions, no caps on their internet service, like over 22 gigabytes in a month, things like that, to low income families, because a lot of people are at home. A lot of people are having to work from home. A lot of people have kids that now have to do e-learning from home. And if they don't have good internet access, that's a problem. So internet providers have just offered to help. Nobody forced them to. There was no law passed. They just offered to help. So there needs to be a lot more of that. You can lean on the government and ask them to fix your problems, but when has they ever been really good at fixing problems? Ask yourself that. Listening to one another. That's another thing we should focus on as a society and quit worrying about political theater. Just have conversations. And don't try to have them on social media. Talk to people. Talk to your coworkers. Talk to your friends. Talk to your spouse, your loved ones. Have conversations. I know it sucks sometimes. And, there's a lot of social rules about when it's okay to bring up politics or when it's okay to bring up really important issues. I get that. Because if you're around friends and family, you don't want to ruin the environment with discussion on politics, because it might get heated. You might disagree. But at the end of the day, that's the only way people are going to actually be able to come to any kind of middle ground and figure out what we agree on, instead of constantly fighting about what we disagree about. And then finally, the fabric of society and the role that the family unit, the complete family unit, plays in it. I think that's another enormous issue that, again, I'm not saying government needs to address it. I'm saying we need to address it. Fathers in households, staying in households. I think a father abandoning a family and leaving them to, leaving single mothers or single parents. I think I've always said this, it's one of the banes of society. And it's something that I might have a full show or shows about this going forward. But I truly believe that abandonment can cause future abandonment exponentially, because it affects the single parent that's left behind. It affects the children that are left behind. They grow up, they have kids. Some of these issues keep spreading and keep multiplying. And, you can probably, in a lot of cases, relate that topic to the mental health topic. So that's my take on political theater. All the things that are being so highly politicized and how I'm so tired of it, and my tips for kind of extracting yourself out of there. Like I said, follow us on Facebook and Twitter, subscribe on YouTube. I really appreciate anybody who takes the time to watch the videos or listen and follow us on Twitter. Thank you very much. Continue to do so. Share the content if you like it. And guys, just try to promote this message. Be calm. Listen to one another. Have your own thoughts and opinions. You might disagree with other people, but listening to them and what it is that you disagree on will help you understand their point of view. It might help you better formulate your arguments against whatever it is you disagree with. And that's civil dialogue. That's honest dialogue. And hopefully you'll find the truth in dialogue. So that's it. Stay safe. Practice the social distancing. Let's not let this thing spread. And I hope to talk to you very soon. Thank you.